Hi everybody, my name is Rick and I'm part of the CIS version 8 editorial panel and have worked on previous control panels for years. This is the 16th in my video series doing a deep dive into the updates to each of the new controls. I've linked to my videos for controls 1 through 15 in the description, as well as a link to the CIS Critical Security Controls page to download your own copy to follow along at home. Today we're talking about control number 16, Application Software Security. In version 7, application security was control 18, and the application security control has been completely overhauled for version 8. We engage SafeCode, a nonprofit organization made up of companies who exchange insights and best practices to improve organization software security programs to help us with this control. Their members include Microsoft, Dell, Adobe, Norton, and Siemens. I have a link to their website in the description where you can download resources to for secure development and DevSecOps. For CIS, SafeCode created a paper that described modern application security program and lifecycle. We used that paper and collaboration with SafeCode to create the new application security control and associated safeguards. All the safeguards are implementation group 2 or 3 because we don't expect implementation group 1 organizations to be developing their own applications. You'll see how we categorize application maturity when I get to the definitions of the SafeCode development group. But there is a possibility of a small company who does create applications on their own who would be implementation group 1 but maybe development group 3. But like I said, it's not a hard and fast rule which safeguards you use to apply. So let's look at the safeguards for control 16. I'll post the controls here on the left. There are 14 of them, which is a lot. 14 ties with control number 3, data protection, for having the most safeguards. So buckle in, this is going to be a long one. Let me look. Oh, it's over 20 minutes. I promise it'll be interesting and informative. Okay. So, while we didn't use version 7, and I'll post version 7 over here as a baseline for creating version 8, not surprisingly, some of its 11 subcontrols still apply. We only retired one of them. Remember, we rename subcontrols to safeguards. We reorder the safeguards to align with the implementation group. And 16.1, establish and maintain a secure application development process. This related to 18.1, establish secure coding processes, but obviously this is the whole process, not just a set of coding rules. And we include 18.2, ensure that explicit error checking is performed in all in-house developed software. 16.2, establish and maintain a process to accept and address software vulnerabilities. This is a rewording of 18.8, establish a process to accept and address reports of software vulnerabilities. Okay, 16.3, perform root cause analysis on security vulnerabilities. This is brand new and really important safeguard. I'll be talking more about this later. 16.4, establish and maintain an inventory of third-party software components. This is new, but would be needed to support 18.3 to verify the acquired software is still supported. So it's another important one. 16.5, use up-to-date and trusted third-party software components. This would include 18.3, which I just mentioned, but is similar to 18.4, only use up-to-date and trusted third-party components. Another similar one. 16.6, establish and maintain a severity rating and process for application vulnerability. This is new, but it's essential when defining and prioritize which vulnerabilities to fix first. 16.7, use standard hardening configuration templates for application infrastructure. This expands on 18.11, use standard hardening configuration templates and for databases, which just said databases there. But in a world of infrastructure as code, it's key to include this in a secure development program because developers are now creating the infrastructure. 16.8, separate production and non-production systems. This is the same as 18.9, separate production and non-production systems. 16.9, train developers in application security concepts and secure coding. This is a rewording of 18.6, ensure software development personnel are trained in secure coding. 16.10, apply secure design principles in application architecture. This is another new one. 16.11, leverage vetted modules or services for application security components. This would include 18.5, use only standardized and extensively reviewed encryption algorithm, but extends to be, security software components like shared libraries, APIs, or credential management. 16.12, implement code level security checks. This is the first of the implementation group 3 controls and a replacement for 18.7, apply static and dynamic code analysis tools. This also fixes the don't have to ask per safeguard rule that is present in 18.7. 16.13, conduct application penetration testing. This is new for application security control, and we put it here instead of in the control 18 pen testing because it's very specific to the application. When I get to control 18, that video, you'll find that is the pen test controls mostly on process than what to test. 16.14, conduct threat modeling. This is another new safeguard. Threat modeling is a paper-based security evaluation of application design and implementation using different threat scenarios. This is one of my favorite activities, so I'll definitely do a full video on threat modeling when I'm done with this series. The only subcontrol we removed from version 7 Control 18 was 18.10, deploy web application firewalls. We felt this was too prescriptive, and while it's a requirement for some regulations like PCI, choosing to use a WAF would come out of the development of security architecture that we talked about back in Control 12. So now that I have noted all the changes, let's do a deeper dive and highlight some of these 14 safeguards, and I'll take these down and put the details on. Wow, that's long. It's like a CVS receipt. Okay. 16.1, establish and maintain a secure application development process. While we indicate to include secure application design standards, secure coding practices, developer training, vulnerability management, and security of third-party code, and security testing procedures as part of that process. We say to review and update the process and documentation annually. 16.2, establish and maintain a process to accept and address software vulnerabilities. We talk about a vulnerability handling process that identifies reporting processes, responsible party for handling vulnerability reports, and a process to intake assignment, remediation, and remediation testing. We advise to use a vulnerability tracking system that includes severity ratings and metrics for measuring timing and identification, analysis, and remediation of those vulnerabilities. And we recommend providing a means for external entities to report vulnerabilities. And we suggest that organizations who create applications for their customers consider this an externally facing policy that helps in setting the expectations for your outside stakeholders. In 16.3, perform root cause analysis on security vulnerabilities. One of our big problems in application security is that we just keep fixing flaws, and we never look at the underlying issues that keep creating these vulnerabilities in the code. I have an application security presentation from over 16 years ago that I gave in Germany. I'll put that over here, that I could still give today that's relevant. I was actually looking for when I did the New York's ISSA chapter back in 2002, but I think that's like literally on a floppy disk somewhere. But most of the content, and you'll see, and I'll put in a couple of the areas from that presentation in 2005, things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and credential management, which are still issues today. And by the way, pretty much all of the 2021 OWASP top 10, and I'll put that up here now, include all those things that I had mentioned back in 2005. So when doing root cause analysis, you ask, is this vulnerability showing up over and over? Then we should probably focus on how to keep flaws from being introduced. So that's kind of the point of this root cause analysis. And that could have been like because of a lack of developer training. It could be from bad templates. It could be from reuse of code or libraries. So we need to get to the why and not just keep fixing the what. 16.4, establish and manage an inventory of third-party software components. Going back to Control Run about asset management, we can't protect what we don't know about. We highlight the need for a bill of materials for current and future software deployments. This inventory would include any risks that each third-party component would pose, and we suggest evaluating the inventory monthly to validate which parts are still supported. In 16.5, use up-to-date and trusted third-party software components. We say, where possible, choose established and proven libraries and frameworks, and to acquire those components from only trusted sources, and either way, evaluate the software for vulnerabilities before you use it. 16.6, establish and maintain a severity rating system to process for application vulnerabilities. This would include setting minimal level of security acceptance for releasing code, such as, fix all the critical and high vulnerabilities before you can release it. Establishing ratings helps triage vulnerabilities to fix the most critical bugs first and promotes risk management as a process. We suggest reviewing the rating system annually as organization risk tolerances might change due to the acquisition of different lines of business, changes in regulations, or contract requirements with their customers. In 16.7, use standard hardening configuration templates for application infrastructure. This includes the underlying servers, containers, databases, web servers, credentialing platforms, pretty much anything that supports the application. This also would include platform as a service and software as a service platforms. In 16.8, separate production and non-production systems. This is fundamental. It's required by most standards and regulations. Some security standards even include different users administrate each environment, though it can be tougher for smaller organizations, we know. Though this safeguard is a lot easier now with cloud platforms, since it's simple and quick to spin up a new system. Back in the day, when you had to physically unbox, plug in, install the operating system, install applications on individual servers, it was a lot more common to do this. So this is kind of a legacy one. 16.9, train developers in application security concepts and secure coding. It's always a surprise to me after 25 years of application security that we still aren't widely teaching the basic security coding techniques in schools. It's not that developers are resistant. I found they really embraced, even came up with even more unique ways to apply controls. It's just it's not the first thought when you're just trying to get your code to run, right? We suggest starting with basic security principles. And then you can drill down things like the OWASP Top 10 or do full BSIM training. We suggest conducting training yearly, but suggest more frequent if vulnerabilities aren't going down or as new developers are brought in. And not included in this control are metrics for promoting secure coding, but we know it's a lot easier to and cheaper to fix flaws early in development, if anything, whether it's building a house or baking a cake. Same with development. So there gets to be an incentive to do it right the first time so you don't have to go back and fix things. Even I had a slide for this back in 2005. Here, I'll put that from that slide from that presentation. This training can be tied back to safeguards in 16.3 based on your most common findings and root causes. 16.10 apply secure design principles in application architecture, where 16.7 relates to secure configurations and hardening. This safeguard is about the architecture itself. These include the concept of least privilege, enforcing mediation to validate user operation and anything the user makes. I mean, as pen testers, we used to always say, never trust user input, because that's what we would do is we'd manipulate it and see what the application would do and get something that wasn't expecting, how it behaved. We give other examples, such as ensuring explicit error checking and to not give too many details in error message, or so that you don't enumerate, so the users can enumerate details in the application to target different components, and minimizing the application attack surface. Error messaging statement's a classic example. When user incorrectly logs in, for instance, don't say the password is wrong, because then an attacker knows the username's correct and they can just brute force the password. Or likewise, if you say the user ID is wrong, they could just, stuff the logins with different user IDs until they discover all the valid user accounts and then start brute forcing all the passwords of those. So make sure it's ambiguous. 16.11, leverage vetted modules or services for application security components. These include security components like identity management, encryption, logging, and auditing. These are critical security functions that you don't want developers writing on their own. This especially is true for encryption. We also used to say, friends don't let friends write custom crypto. Good encryption algorithms are plentiful and have been peer-reviewed and vetted for years or decades. 100% of the time, through the last 20 or so years I've done this, and in pen testing, if a developer wrote their own crypto, it really was encoding and it was not cryptography, and it was very easy to reverse. 16.12, implement code level security checks. This could include static and dynamic testing tools. These checks would be included in the SDLC, the System Development Lifecycle, and often include static code scanning, which is run by the developers themselves or kicked off by when the code's checked into the repository. The dynamic scanning is often done by the security team as code is released into test environments. This includes not only developer written code, but also third-party modules or libraries. Test everything in the bill of materials that you developed where? In 16.4. 16.13, conduct application penetration testing. Penetration testing is the next level above dynamic code scanning. This is a manual interactive test conducted by skilled humans using a variety of specialized tools. This is an implementation group 3 safeguard, but should be used for the most critical applications or whenever it's required by industry regulation or a customer contract. 16.14, conduct threat modeling. We define threat modeling as a security review of a software design or architecture before any code is written. It breaks down the application into its core components, then evaluates every entry point and access level to that component. For example, if you would look at like the user functionality such as login, user transactional components, updating the account profile, changing passwords, even longout, you then would look at the controls around each of these components. And like for logout, how do you close the session? Did you time out the session token? Is it still cached? Is the token or cookie still valid until it expires? Can I reuse it without having to log in again? These kinds of things. You then look at the data flows from the web server to the application server to the database or to the content server, or what APIs are being called, and then you conduct similar analysis of what access levels exist, what functionality is possible, is there encryption during that transit or between the different components. I mean, all kinds of fun stuff. Like I said, I'll do a whole video about it. So now that we went through the deep dive on it, let's look at the upfront material. I'll take that down and put up page 1 of control number 16. Like I said, this is 100% new from version 8, though I will say the overview is just kind of expanded. We kept most of it. And so the overview is to manage security lifecycle of in-house developed, hosted, or acquired software to prevent, detect, and remediate software vulnerabilities before they can impact the enterprise. In the why this control is critical, we talk about how applications are the human-friendly interface to access and manage data. We state that applications are how organizations control access and manage the use of their most sensitive data, which makes them a target for attackers. I mean, why would an attacker spend an effort to break into the network, traverse to the data store, hack the server, compromise the database, and exfiltrate the data when they could just use the same user-friendly interface that the employees do to get the data they want? This scenario is why controlling and protecting credentials discussed in Control 6 is so important. We talk about how while compromising your credentials might be one of the easiest way to get access, but exploiting application flaws is sometimes even faster, since today's applications are highly complex, diverse, and dynamic. Running on multiple platforms with expansive architectures, they provide a large attack surface that's tough to keep current and keep protected, some of which might be out of control of the organization. We talk about application security challenges, such as how applications are rarely created from a blank page, or technically a blank screen, but they're assembled from a mix of different development frameworks and libraries, existing code, new code, this coupled with the decrease in development life cycles time through DevOps, which employs many frequent code pushes, and the presence of evolving data protection laws and regional privacy regulation that require regional specific or sector specific data protection requirements. All of this increases the likelihood of software vulnerabilities and flaws. Now, these flaws might be present due to insecure design, insecure infrastructure, coding mistakes, weak authentication, or failure to test for unusual or unexpected conditions. This is all what the hackers are looking for. Buffer overflow, SQL injection, cross-site scripting, anything to gain access to sensitive data, or to take control of the computing assets that are used by the application and use that asset to launch for further attacks, or just use the resources to conduct other activity like being part of a botnet or a malicious hosting site or even cryptocurrency mining. For attackers, application can also be used as a watering hole attack, which targets the users who access it by either stealing their credentials or pushing down malware to them. And we close this section by talking about the expansive use of software as a service platforms, which are developed and managed by third parties, and that these might be hosted anywhere in the world. These software as a service platforms are usually customized by your organization that may pull data from your database or use your enterprise credentials. So these no-code, low-code applications, as we call them, can introduce vulnerabilities. And because these code updates are often not part of the system development lifecycle, they're not managed by your developers, they're not created or maintained by the development team, but they're usually run by the business unit who's using that application. And it might be a third party or someone from the finance department that's updating that for it, not the development team. So it might be completely outside of their normal system development lifecycle and the security controls. For procedures and tools, we start with SafeCode's 3-tiered approach to software development groups, similar to our CIS implementation groups. These are based on a maturity scale for development teams. They are Development Group 1, an organization largely relying on off-the-shelf or open source software, perhaps conducting light website coding. A Development Group 2, organization that relies on custom web or native code application integration with third-party components, with organization that has development staff and uses development best practices. And then Development Group 3, and this is an organization where they make major investment in developing custom software either for their own business or for their customers, and would host or manage these applications themselves or integrate into a large range of third-party software components, and they would have a mature development process and likely be using DevOps. We then go into the first step of developing an application security program by implementing a vulnerability management process. This process would integrate into the SDLC, but be lightweight and seamless into the standard bug fix process. And we suggest including root cause analysis and severity rating to prioritize the remediation efforts. We discuss training training developers in application security concepts and secure coding practices. We talk about the risk of insecure infrastructure supporting the application and reference guidance from controls 1.7 and 12 and 13. We highlight that ideally, application security programs introduce security early into the system development lifecycle. And actually, I had a slide about that back in 2005, where security checks fit into the SDLC. Here you can see that we have threat modeling and static code review and security testing, which now is called dynamic testing, within some of the phases. We talk a bit about design level vulnerabilities, and while they're less common than code level flaws, they're more severe and harder to fix quickly. Which is why to suggest threat modeling to discover these flaws during the design phase before any code is written. And we introduced the concept of a bug bounty program, which larger or more mature development teams might want to consider to kind of crowdsource their security testing. We close by referencing the NIST Secure Software Development Framework, or SSDF, that was published last year. It's included in the other application security reference sites at the end of this section. And they include, of course, safe code, application security addendum that I mentioned on which this whole thing was made, the NIST SSDF, as I just talked about, and the link for that. We talk about the Software Alliance Application Security Framework. The link for that site is there. As finally, the OWASP's latest, top 10 application vulnerabilities. Whew. That finally wraps up Control 16. Hopefully this was helpful to go through the details of how to create an application security program and what the key elements are. There are a lot of them. This topic definitely needs additional videos, and I'll drill down to drill down in some areas. So please put in the comments below if you would like more information on a certain topic. If you haven't already, please download the controls yourself from CISsecurity.org. The link is in the description. And if you have any questions or comments, sign up to the controls workbench. The link is in the description as well, where you can post questions and perhaps contribute to our next version. And as always, feel free to leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a great day. Hi everybody, as you know I have no pets to share, but I do have these interesting pieces. This robot's body is made from a piece of molding from a furniture. Also has beaded arms and some kind of strange hands. But hope you enjoy. Have a great day.